My name is Talia Brooks. I'm 33 years old, and I spent 6 years married to a man who turned into a stranger. Or maybe he was always a stranger, and I was just too in love, too hopeful, too determined to make it work to see him clearly. Either way, the man I thought I married disappeared somewhere around year 4, replaced by someone who saw me as an obstacle instead of a partner. When Jared and I met, we were both 24. He was working as a logistics manager for a retail chain. Long hours, decent pay, messy schedules. I just landed the kind of job my parents called sensible, a data analyst. Stable, steady income benefits. Nothing glamorous, nothing Instagram worthy, but enough to pay rent on time and buy slightly overpriced groceries without panic. We were not some great love story at the beginning. We were comfortable, easy. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, bonded over complaining about student loans and broken printers. He made me laugh. I like that he seemed grounded, that he talked about wanting a simple life. Nothing crazy, just a place that's ours and a fridge that isn't empty, he'd said. 2 years later, we got married in a small ceremony. His parents mostly paid for because both of us were still digging out of debt. There were folding chairs, store-bought cupcakes, and a DJ who messed up our first dance song. It should have felt cheap. It didn't. It felt like possibility. Those first few years were good. Not movie montage perfect, but real. We had arguments about dishes and whose turn it was to take the car in for an oil change. We also had nights where we lay on the couch with takeout containers on our laps, watching terrible TV and talking about the future. Back then, Jared would kiss my temple and say, "We're going to build something, you and me. Just give it time." I did. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in the way mold does, quietly in corners you don't look at often. Around year 4, Jared started noticing what other people had. His friend from college posted photos of a new house, 3 bedrooms, white countertops, a yard big enough for a dog, and a barbecue. Another guy he knew from work bought a sleek new car. Someone else took a European vacation and uploaded daily pictures of wine glasses and train stations. Suddenly our lives, the ones we'd once been proud of for being steady, weren't good enough. Our second-hand couch wasn't good enough. Our modest apartment with the thin walls wasn't good enough. Our used Honda with the dent in the bumper definitely wasn't good enough. And apparently, I wasn't good enough either. "You're just fine with this," Jared would say, gesturing around the apartment like it personally offended him. "You're fine with average." "I'm fine with stable," I'd correct quietly. "There's a difference." He didn't hear the difference. Or he chose not to. About a year later, Jared quit his job. He came home one Tuesday, loosened his tie, and announced over dinner, "I'm done with logistics. I'm serious about starting my own thing." My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. "Okay, have you lined something up?" He waved a hand. "I've been talking to people. There's an opportunity for a consultancy, operation systems. People pay good money for this. I just need the time to build it." I remember staring at my plate, calculating numbers in my head. Rent, utilities, groceries, my student loan payment, his car payment, my car insurance, health insurance, if he left his job. His face was so hopeful, so sure. "I'll figure it out," he promised, leaning across the table to take my hand. "You always say you believe in me, Talia. Just give me a year." I did what I always did back then. I believed him. The business never really started. There were plans, sure, lots of them. Whiteboards with arrows and bullet points, spreadsheets open on his laptop, podcasts about entrepreneurship playing on his phone while he paced the apartment. But clients' invoices, actual income, those didn't show up. What did show up were new expenses, investments, he called them courses, software subscriptions, networking mixers that suspiciously took place at expensive bars. Meanwhile, my sensible job carried everything: the rent, the utilities, the groceries, the medical bills, the minimum payments on credit cards that he swore would be temporary. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. Sometimes one person carried more for a while. Sometimes you had to bet on the person you loved. But the more I carried, the less he seemed to respect it. By year 5, the criticism had become a constant background noise in our apartment. The way I dressed. "You're going to work, not a funeral, Talia. Try some color." the way I talked. You sound like you're reading from a policy manual. The friends I had. You still hang out with them. They're not going anywhere. The hobbies I enjoyed. You call spreadsheets a hobby. That's depressing. He'd roll his eyes when I spoke, interrupt me mid-sentence, make little snipes that seemed tiny on their own, but added up day after day like pebbles in my shoes. God, you're so boring. He said once when I told him I couldn't go out because I needed to finish an end-of-quarter report. I laughed it off, made a joke back. Later, alone in the shower, I turned the water too hot and let the sting distract me from the words echoing in my head. When I tried to talk to him about it, how his comments made me feel, how I felt like I was disappearing in my own life, he'd deny there was any problem. I'm just joking, he'd say. You're so sensitive lately. I never know what I can say around you anymore. You make me feel like I'm walking on eggshells. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so much. 4 months ago, everything snapped. We were at dinner with another couple Jared had been trying to impress for weeks, Derek and Alyssa. Derek worked in finance and talked like he was narrating his own highlight reel. The restaurant was the kind with low lighting and prices that made my stomach clench. Derek ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than our weekly grocery bill. Jared didn't even flinch. For 2 hours, Derek held court. My Tesla, this, my portfolio, that. Options, yields growth, private equity targets. Jared laughed at every joke, even the ones that weren't jokes. Alyssa smiled like she'd practiced in a mirror. Whenever I tried to contribute something, Jared would redirect the conversation. Talia's she's modest, he'd say, with a little chuckle hand on my shoulder that felt more like a weight than a gesture of affection. She's not into all this money talk. I stared at my plate at the expensive steak I'd cut into small, even pieces and tried not to calculate how many hours at my desk this evening was costing me. On the drive home, the street lights smeared into yellow streaks against the windshield. I watched them the way people watch waves, letting them blur my thoughts. You barely said anything tonight, Jared said suddenly. You made us look so boring. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. I said plenty. You just weren't listening. He scoffed. Derek was talking about real things, Talia. Investments, growth, future plans. Meanwhile, you're sitting there like a mute. Do you know how that looks? To who I asked softly? To Derek. He spent the whole night bragging about his car like a teenager who just got his license. The car filled with a thick, dangerous silence. When we got home, the silence exploded. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Jared shouted, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the frames. You have no drive, no ambition. You're content to just exist. Do you know how embarrassing that is for me? I stood in the hallway, keys still in my hand. Embarrassing, I work full-time. I pay our bills. You work a mediocre job, and you're fine with it. His mouth curled around the word like it tasted bad. You have no goals, no plans, nothing. I didn't sign up to be stuck in this life forever. Something in me, something small and stubborn, pushed back. Then what did you sign up for, Jared? I asked quietly. Because it seems like you signed up for someone else's life and you're furious I'm not delivering it on your schedule. Wrong thing to say. He went nuclear. For an hour he paced the living room and tore into me. How I'd held him back. How he'd wasted his best years on me. How he deserved better than this. I let him rant until the words blurred together. Until I felt detached from my own body like I was watching someone else's fight through a window. Eventually, I walked to the guest room, closed the door, and lay down fully clothed on the bed. The springs creaked under my weight. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. The next morning, he was calm. Too calm. He brewed coffee. He hummed under his breath. The kitchen smelled like roasted beans and dishonesty. Can we talk? He asked, sliding a mug in my direction. My stomach dropped. Sure. He sat across from me, hands folded, posture perfect. Talia, I think we both know this isn't working, he said using the same tone he used on customer service calls. I think we should separate. I didn't flinch. After last night, part of me had been waiting for these words. If that's what you want, I said. My voice sounded small even to me. I'll keep the apartment, he continued like he was reading bullet points off a list. You can move out. Find your own place. I'll stay here. I've built a life in this neighborhood. I blinked. The apartment that's in my name. The one I've been paying for? He frowned as if I'd interrupted his presentation. We've both lived here for 6 years. I have just as much right to it. Legally, no, you don't. I said, a tremor of anger hardening my tone. The lease is in my name. I've paid most of the rent. We live in an equitable distribution state, not community property. His expression shifted, something sharp sliding into place. I'm not asking Talia, he said quietly. I'm telling you, I'm keeping the apartment, and I want half of everything. Your retirement account, savings, everything. We built this life together. I stared at him, at the man I'd once promised to love in sickness and in health. The man who hadn't brought in a paycheck in 18 months was sitting here demanding half of everything I'd bled for. That's not how this works, I said. His jaw clenched. The mask slipped. That's exactly how this works, he hissed. And if you don't give me what I want, I'll make sure the court destroys you. I felt the room tilt just slightly. What does that mean? I asked. It means, he said, leaning forward, eyes cold. I'll tell them you were abusive, controlling, that I was afraid of you. Do you know how that plays in divorce court? They'll take everything from you and give it to me. You'll be lucky to keep your car. He said it casually, like he was outlining a marketing strategy, like inventing abuse was just another tool in a negotiation. Somewhere under the fear, something in me went very, very still. I looked at him, really, looked at him, and realized I was done begging this man to see me as a human being. I heard you, I said softly. Do what you need to. His brows knit. You should think very carefully about this, Talia. I'm serious. I know, I said. So am I. I picked up my mug, took a sip of lukewarm coffee, and let the bitterness sit on my tongue. He thought he'd just put a gun to my head. He didn't realize I'd already loaded my own. Here's what Jared didn't know. By the time he sat across from me at that kitchen table and calmly threatened to invent abuse, I'd already spent 2 months preparing for the possibility that the man I married might turn into exactly who he showed me that morning. 2 months of ink and screenshots and quiet, methodical fear. It started on a Tuesday night with a notebook. I'd gone for a walk after another argument, the kind we'd been having more often. The topic didn't even matter anymore. He'd found something new to criticize. I'd tried to defend myself. He'd twisted it until I felt like I was the unreasonable one. The script was predictable. I was halfway around the block when a thought hit me so hard I stopped walking. If he ever lies about me, it'll be his word against mine, and he's better at performing. I stood there under the flickering street light, phone in my hand, heart racing. That was the first night I wrote something down. Date, time, what he said, what we were arguing about, how he threatened to make me regret not agreeing with him, though back then, the threat was just about money, not the legal system. Not yet. At first it felt dramatic, paranoid, like I was betraying him by documenting his words. I almost tore the page out. But then I thought about all the little ways he'd rewritten our fights in the past. I never said that. You're twisting my words. You're remembering it wrong. And slowly, I realized I wasn't betraying him. I was protecting myself from the man he was choosing to be. So I kept writing. Every time he called me mediocre, every time he mocked my job, every time he suggested I was lucky he stayed with someone so comfortable with average, I wrote it down. When he started texting me about money, about how I should push for promotions faster, how my little raise wasn't enough for the life we deserve, I took screenshots. I backed them up. The night he told me I was embarrassing to be around in front of his successful friends, I sat in bed afterward with my laptop open and my phone beside me and created a folder with a name only I would recognize. It took me 3 more weeks to admit I needed help. Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and faint coffee. Ms. Harding was not what I expected when I thought divorce attorney. No sharp-shouldered suit, no cold stare. She wore a soft blue blouse, had her dark hair pulled back in a low ponytail, and looked at me like she was listening to a human being, not evaluating a case file. Still, my palms were sweating when I sat down across from her. I'm not even sure I'm divorcing him. I started, words tumbling out too fast. I just need to know what would happen if I did. I feel ridiculous even being here. Most people feel that way the first time, she said calmly, sliding a legal pad in front of her. You're not ridiculous. You're gathering information. That's smart. I exhaled slowly. Okay, tell me what's going on, she said. So I did. Not everything. Not the way his criticism hollowed me out. Not the way I'd started second-guessing my own thoughts. But I told her enough. The job he quit, the business that never launched, the financial weight shifting onto my shoulders. The comments about my ambition, my mediocre job, his obsession with other people's lives. When I mentioned the threats about taking half of everything, about how I owed him a lifestyle upgrade. It was the first time I saw Miss Harding's expression sharpen. Have you ever felt physically unsafe? She asked. I thought about that for a long moment. No. He yells. He slams doors, but he's never hit me. It's more words pressure. She nodded. That still matters. Do you have anything written down? Text messages, emails, notes? I pulled the notebook out of my bag like a confession. I started writing things down, I said. In case I was remembering wrong, or he said I was remembering wrong, and I've saved some texts. I don't know if it's useful. She opened the notebook, scanned a page, then another. Her pen tapped once against the pad. This is very useful, she said. You're giving me dates, direct quotes, context. Has he ever threatened to lie about you, make things up if you don't agree to what he wants? Not yet, I said. The word yet sat heavy between us. Okay, she said, voice steady. Here's what you need to understand about where you live. We're in an equitable distribution state. That means a judge tries to divide marital assets fairly, not automatically 50-50. Given that you've been the primary earner the last 18 months while he hasn't worked, that matters. She outlined possibilities. If we divorced, if we separated, what a judge might look at, what documentation helped. And the recording laws, I asked, suddenly the question surprising even me. If I recorded a conversation with him, would that be legal? In this state, yes, she said. We're a one-party consent jurisdiction. As long as one person in the conversation consents to recording, and that person can be you, it's legal. But she added, meeting my eyes, you need to know why you'd be doing it. Because he's already rewriting our arguments, I said quietly. Because I can feel him building a story where I'm the ungrateful, controlling one. Because if he ever decides to weaponize that, I can't fight smoke with my bare hands. Ms. Harding nodded once. If he ever threatens to fabricate abuse or control to gain advantage in court, you need that documented. Judges take that very seriously. But you also need to know this. If he files first and claims you're abusive, even if it's a lie, you're on defense from day one. You'll spend months and a lot of money proving something didn't happen. I swallowed. So what do I do? Keep documenting, she said. If things escalate, if he makes threats about lying to the court, manipulating the system, you file first. That's your preemptive strike with documentation. You're not just telling your side, you're showing it. The idea of filing for divorce felt like jumping off a cliff I couldn't see the bottom of. I walked out of her office that day with a folder of information and a knot in my chest. I didn't decide to jump that day, but I did decide to pack a parachute. The first time I recorded him, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. We were in the living room. He was pacing, angry about money again, about how I didn't understand what it took to build something real, about how he couldn't do big things with someone whose idea of excitement was paying off a credit card. My phone lay on the arm of the couch screen, dark microphone silently capturing every word. When it was over, I went into the bathroom, locked the door, slid down against the tub, and listened. Hearing his voice as an outsider made something in my chest twist. I sounded so small, so tired. I saved the file. I backed it up. I labeled it with the date. One recording turned into 3, then 5. 2 months after that first meeting with Ms. Harding, the man sitting across from me at the kitchen table looked me in the eye and said he would tell a court I was abusive if I didn't give him what he wanted. My phone was on the table between us, screen face down, recording. The Monday after his threat, I took the morning off and went back to Ms. Harding's office. She listened, jaw tightening slowly as I recounted his exact words. I'll tell them you were abusive, controlling, that I was afraid of you. Do you know how that plays in divorce court? When I mentioned the recording, she didn't smile. She just nodded. "Do you still want to stay married to this man?" she asked. The question hurt more than I expected. There was a time when the answer would have been automatic, when I would have said yes, and then followed it with a list of reasonable excuses for his behavior. Stress, fear, pressure, a bad week. Now, sitting in that chair with my notebook and my flash drive and my exhaustion, there was only silence. "No," I said finally. The word came out dry. "I don't." "Then this is what we're going to do," she said. "We file first. Irreconcilable differences. We request equitable distribution. We include your documentation of financial contributions for the past 18 months and the transcript of his threat to fabricate abuse allegations. We let him know you're not a soft target." Her pen moved across the paper, outlining steps. My life became bullet points. Once he served, she added, "Do not engage with him directly. No emotional texts, no long explanations. Everything funnels through me." "Understood." "Yes," I said, though my stomach felt like it had dropped through the floor. Filing for divorce felt less like signing papers and more like quietly admitting that the life I'd been clinging to was already gone. But there was a strange kind of peace buried under the grief. I wasn't waiting to be blindsided anymore. I was moving first. The filing itself was anticlimactic. I signed my name so many times, my hand cramped. Ms. Harding and her paralegal double-checked everything. Dates, account numbers, attachments. The transcript of Jared's threat typed out word for word beneath a timestamp. "This is going to matter," Ms. Harding said, tapping the page. She told me it would take about a week for him to be served. Maybe less, maybe more. Bureaucracy had its own timeline. In the meantime, she advised me to start moving my essentials. "Don't empty the apartment," she cautioned. "That can be used against you later. But anything sentimental, anything that's truly yours, your documents, your valuables, don't leave them where he can damage or hide them." So that's what I did. I turned my life into a series of small, quiet exits. I packed my important documents, birth certificate, passport, bank information into a folder and tucked it into my work bag. I wrapped my grandmother's ring in tissue paper and slid it into a pocket of my jacket. I took a duffel bag to work one day, and instead of going straight home, stopped at Ben's apartment 3 neighborhoods over. Ben had been my friend since college, the kind of steady presence Jared had always privately resented. "When you texted and asked if you could store a few things here, I figured something serious was happening," Ben said, holding the door open as I stepped inside with the bag. "You okay?" "I'm getting there," I said. It was the closest thing to the truth I could manage. We carried boxes up one at a time over the next few days. Clothes I actually wore, a box of old photos, a small jewelry box, a stack of books I couldn't bear to leave behind. Every time I left the apartment with something in my hands, Jared barely looked up from his laptop. As far as he knew, I was going to work, to the store, to the gym. He didn't ask. He was too busy planning how the court was going to destroy me. He never considered that I might have a plan too. 8 days after we filed, my phone started vibrating on my desk at work. Unknown number, then Jared's name, then again and again. By mid-afternoon, I had 16 missed calls. I didn't answer any of them. Around call 10, the text messages started. "What did you do? You filed for divorce without talking to me. I got served at work. Talia." At work. Everyone saw it. How could you humiliate me like this? I stared at the words until they blurred, then turned my phone face down and slid it into my drawer. Ms. Harding had been very clear. No direct engagement, no explanations, no apologies typed at midnight, no fights that could be screenshot and twisted. If he wanted to talk, he could talk to my attorney. At 5:30, I left the office, walked to the parking lot, sat in my car, and let myself shake for exactly 3 minutes. Then I drove back to the apartment one more time. I told myself I was just grabbing the last of my things. I didn't admit even to myself that part of me wanted to see his face when he realized I was not the scared, apologetic wife he expected. The second I opened the door, I knew he was home. The TV was off. The lights were on, the air felt charged like a storm had built up inside the walls. He was standing in the living room, the manila envelope from the court clutched in one hand, the other curled into a fist at his side. "You filed for divorce," he said. His voice was eerily calm. His eyes weren't. You filed first. You made me look like the bad guy. You threatened to lie about me, I almost said. Instead, I set my keys on the counter. You said you were going to tell the court I was abusive if I didn't give you what you wanted, I replied. What did you think I was going to do? Sit here and wait for you to follow through. His face flushed a blotchy red creeping up his neck. I wasn't serious, he snapped. I was upset. People say things when they're upset. You were very specific, I said. You laid out the whole strategy for me. I believed you. This is insane, Talia, he said, pacing now, the envelope crumpling in his hand. You're overreacting. You've let some lawyer get in your head, and now you're blowing up our marriage just to prove a point. I didn't need anyone to get in my head, I said quietly. You did that yourself. His gaze dropped to the stack of papers on the kitchen counter, a copy of the filing Ms. Harding had sent me. I'd left it there deliberately. I want to see the paperwork, he said. It's right there. He snatched it up and flipped through the pages, eyes scanning the lines. At first he looked smug, like he was searching for something to mock. Irreconcilable differences, equitable distribution, documented financial contributions. Then he reached page 3, the transcript. June 14th, horse 8th, 23 a.m. Jared, if you don't give me what I want, I'll make sure the court destroys you. I'll tell them you were abusive, controlling, that I was afraid of you. His eyes moved faster. His jaw tightened. He read his own words laid out in cold, neutral font. The silence in the kitchen thickened. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something crack. You recorded me, he asked, voice hoarse. I recorded us, I said. Our conversation, which is legal here, by the way. One-party consent. You can't do that. He said they can't use this. I'll tell the judge it was taken out of context. There is no context in which threatening to lie about abuse looks better, Jared, I said. You didn't misspeak. You were very clear. He stared at the pages in his hand like they were written in a language he couldn't read. You've ruined everything, he whispered. He sank down right there on the kitchen tile, back against the cabinet, paper slack in his grip. For a moment he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not because he was vulnerable, but because for the first time his performance wasn't working on anyone. Not on a judge, not on a lawyer, not on me. No, I said softly. You ruined it when you decided I was an ATM instead of a wife. When you chose threats over conversations, I just made sure you couldn't drag me down with you. He didn't answer. I picked up the last box from the bedroom, my remaining clothes, a framed photo of me and my parents, the plant I'd kept alive for 3 years in spite of everything, and walked toward the door. He didn't try to stop me. As I stepped into the hallway, the box heavy in my arms, one thought kept circling in my mind like a quiet, steady drumbeat. He thought I would crumble. He had no idea how long I'd been building the spine to walk away. The 3 weeks that followed felt like navigating a storm inside a courtroom. Only the storm wasn't loud. It was quiet, calculated, built from emails, filings, and the steady tightening of a noose Jared had woven for himself. He had always believed he could talk his way out of anything. He wasn't prepared for what evidence looked like. Simon West entered the picture exactly the way Jared once had, confident, polished, and convinced of his own brilliance. I first saw him in mediation. Sharp suit, sharper expression. He introduced himself with a handshake so tight it felt more like a warning. Mr. Ashford is eager to resolve this amicably, he said, sliding into the chair across from us. Ms. Harding didn't blink. Wonderful. So are we. But Simon's smile was the kind men give before firing a shot. He flipped open a file. First, we'll need to discuss the illegally obtained recording. Ms. Harding leaned back, hands folded calmly in her lap. Ah, that's interesting. Considering we live in a one-party consent state, my client was well within her rights. Simon's jaw ticked. Context matters. We don't know the emotional state she provoked. Ms. Harding cut in, voice as smooth as glass. If your argument is that Mr. Ashford was emotionally coerced into threatening to commit perjury, I can assure you that's not a winning strategy. I almost laughed. Almost. Simon's smile thinned. He shifted tactics. Mr. Ashford would also like to address the fact that Mrs. Ashford abandoned the marital home. That reflects poorly on her willingness to participate in reconciliation. Ms. Harding opened our binder color-coded tabs, printed receipts, timestamps. She slid a stack of rent invoices across the table. Here is documentation showing that my client paid 100% of the rent and utilities for the past 18 months, she said. Meanwhile, your client contributed nothing financially, which means she had every right to leave when he threatened her. Simon froze for half a second. Then he pivoted. Mr. Ashford believes he was financially abused, he said, straightening his papers. He claims Mrs. Ashford discouraged him from pursuing career opportunities and made him dependent on her income. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips. Ms. Harding did not flinch. She pulled out printed screenshots, text messages Jared had sent 18 months ago, begging to quit his job. I'm so burnt out. Please let me stop doing this. I promise I'll find something else. Just give me time. She passed them across the table. Simon read them silently, then reread them. Jared's face reddened so fast I could practically feel the heat radiating off him. Ms. Harding spoke again, voice calm but carrying the weight of a sledgehammer. These messages contradict your entire argument. Your client wasn't forced to quit. He begged to. And when he failed to build the business he promised her, he began demanding more money, more lifestyle upgrades, more sacrifices. She slid over the credit card statements next. Luxury purchases Jared had made on cards in my name. Silence spread like smoke through the room. Even Simon stopped posturing for a moment. Mediation was supposed to last an hour. It stretched into 3. Jared cried at one point, not the gasping, real kind of cry, the kind where he breathed shakily and dabbed directly beneath one eye to make sure everyone noticed. He claimed he'd been emotionally neglected, that he'd felt unsupported, that he'd always believed I would help him build his dreams. And each time Ms. Harding countered with receipts. Actual receipts. There was a moment, maybe a full 5 seconds, when Jared looked directly at me, eyes glossy, jaw trembling slightly. If I hadn't lived through the last 6 years, I might have mistaken it for genuine pain. But then he blinked too slowly, the same blink he used when he was lying to his parents about avoiding responsibility. And just like that, my sympathy evaporated. 2 weeks later, we stood in front of a judge. Judge Patterson was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a low bun and a stare that could peel bark off a tree. She read the case file with a focus so intense it made my stomach churn. Jared sat beside Simon at the opposing table. I could see his leg bouncing under the table, a nervous twitch he'd never been able to hide. Ms. Harding spoke with the same steady precision she had used in mediation. Your Honor, we have provided documentation demonstrating Ms. Brooks's financial contributions, Mr. Ashford's absence of income for 18 months, and a transcript of Mr. Ashford threatening to fabricate abuse allegations to influence divorce proceedings. Simon stood. Your Honor, that transcript was taken out. Judge Patterson lifted a hand without looking up. Mr. West, sit. He sat. Cold panic flickered across Jared's face. The judge turned to Paige, then another. Finally, she lifted her eyes and pinned Jared with a stare so sharp I felt it from across the room. Mr. Ashford, she said, did you threaten to falsely accuse your wife of abuse in order to gain advantage in this divorce? The air thinned. Jared's breath hitched. His eyes darted to Simon, who stared down at his notes as if the table had become fascinating. I was upset, Jared stammered. People say things when... That is not what I asked, Judge Patterson said. Did you make that threat? Silence stretched so long I wondered if time itself was holding its breath. Finally, Jared swallowed hard. Yes. The judge nodded once slowly. I do not take kindly to threats of perjury in my courtroom, she said. Even threats made in anger. It demonstrates a willingness to manipulate the legal system for personal gain. That has consequences. Jared shrank almost visibly. Simon shifted uncomfortably. I sat so still I wasn't sure I was breathing. The final settlement emerged with the clarity of a bell. Talia keeps the apartment, her retirement account, her savings, her car. Jared keeps his car, his personal belongings, a $12,000 lump sum reflecting the first 4 years of marriage when he was employed. No alimony, no additional payouts, no claim on future earnings. A clean break. Simon tried to protest. Something about fairness, something about contributions, but Judge Patterson shut it down with the finality of a gavel strike. "Your client is fortunate this court is not imposing further penalties," she said. "Given the documented threat, this is more than fair." Jared signed the papers without looking at me. For a moment I almost wished he would look just once, just long enough to acknowledge what he had done, what we had been. But he kept his eyes fixed on the table, not in shame, in anger. His hands trembled as he handed the pen back. When it was over, Miss E. Harding gathered the documents, placed them neatly into a folder, and whispered, "You did everything right." For the first time in months, I believed her. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the sunlight felt different, like stepping out of a long, dark tunnel. I took one breath, then another. Inside my chest, something unclenched. Not joy, not yet, but relief. A quiet, steady relief that told me I had survived the hardest part, and that the next chapter, whatever it looked like, would finally be mine to write. The divorce was finalized 4 months ago, but some days it feels like the real separation began long before the judge ever signed a page. People like to imagine endings happen all at once, like a door slamming shut. But in my case, it was more like a house settling after years of strain. Creak by creak, beam by beam, until one day you step back and realize the place you'd been trying so hard to hold together was already collapsing. Now, standing in the center of my quiet apartment, I can finally hear the silence without flinching. The first thing I did after the papers were signed was go home and tear down the heavy gray curtains Jared insisted on buying because they look luxurious. They made the whole living room feel like a funeral beneath them. Sunlight flooded the space so brightly it revealed dust in the corners, scratches on the floorboards. Little imperfections I hadn't noticed in years. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I redecorated slowly on weekends, one small piece at a time. New bedding in a color I actually liked. A secondhand bookshelf, a lamp with a warm glow that made my evenings look softer. I rearranged the living room twice, then a third time, until the layout felt like me. Not us. Me. I moved the remaining furniture Jared had once refused to part with. The ornate side table he insisted was elegant. The rug he bought during one of his investment moods. The framed minimalist art prints he claimed made us look professional. All of it went. I donated what I could, threw away the rest. The apartment felt lighter with every piece that left. My friends noticed. My neighbors noticed. Even Ben, who helped me haul things to the curb, whistled and said, "This place looks more like you every time I see it." For once, I believed him. Financially, the change was startling. After years of feeling like I was bailing out a sinking ship with a cracked cup, my bank account finally stopped hemorrhaging. No more surprise credit card charges. No more luxury business development expenses. No more payments for things I never agreed to. The first month after the divorce, I sat at my kitchen table with my budget spreadsheet open and stared at the numbers in disbelief. For the first time in years, my paycheck was actually mine. I was saving money again, building something again. Not for both of us, for me. I didn't realize how heavy the financial stress had been until it was gone. The relief tasted like cool water after a long, dry season. Socially, the fallout came in waves. Most of our mutual friends split cleanly into 2 camps. The ones who already knew something was wrong, and the ones who preferred a pretty lie over an uncomfortable truth. A few people reached out to me privately. "I always wondered why he talked to you like that. You seemed so quiet around him." "Talia, I'm glad you're out. If you ever need anything, help with the apartment or just someone to sit with, name it." Others took his side. According to them, I blindsided Jared. I recorded him secretly. I ambushed him with lawyers and legal jargon. I destroyed his reputation. Not one of those people mentioned the part where he threatened to lie about abuse. Convenient. How stories become palatable when the messy parts are cut out. I stopped defending myself. Not because their opinions didn't hurt. They did. But because I finally understood something. Anyone who could look at evidence, look at my life, and still choose to believe Jared's version of events was someone I didn't want in mine. Good riddance. The strangest moments of recovery were the quiet ones. Like the first weekend I slept in without being jolted awake by Jared pacing the apartment at 7 in the morning because his newest business idea couldn't wait. Or the first time I cooked dinner and nobody critiqued the seasoning. Or the first time I came home from work and the apartment was exactly as I left it. No passive-aggressive messes, no strategically placed bills, no tension humming in the corners. For months, my shoulders had instinctively tensed, every time I turned my key in the lock waiting for some new crisis to unfold. Now the only thing that greeted me was soft lamplight and the faint scent of lemon cleaner. The absence of fear is a strange thing. You don't know you've been living with fear until the day it goes quiet. I started taking long walks again, not to escape to breathe. Some weekends I met up with friends for brunch. Other weekends I took myself on small outings, antique shops, bookstores, the park. I'd forgotten how to enjoy my own company. It turns out I missed myself more than I realized. Ben and I grabbed coffee once or twice. Not in a romantic way. He's firmly a friend, but in a human way, someone who remembers who I was before I spent years shrinking myself to fit beside a man who needed more space than he ever gave. One night, over hot chocolate, he said, "You seem lighter." I didn't know how to respond, so I smiled. Maybe he was right. Every few weeks, someone would text me asking if I'd heard the latest update about Jared. The last I heard, he moved back in with his parents temporarily, then out again. He'd gotten an entry-level job at a marketing firm much lower than what he'd hoped for, much more work than he'd expected. Apparently, adjusting to actual responsibility after 18 months of entrepreneurship wasn't going well. He told people I sabotaged him, that I took advantage of his trust, that I twisted his words, I didn't correct him. People who wanted to know the truth already knew it. People who wanted a villain already had one. There was nothing left for me to win or lose in that conversation. Sometimes people ask, "Do you regret marrying him?" The answer surprises even me. No. I learned who I don't want to be with. I learned the cost of ignoring red flags. I learned that love, real love, doesn't require you to disappear to keep the peace. I learned that I am capable of surviving something I once thought would break me, and I learned that evidence is not cold or cruel. Evidence protects you when people weaponize emotion. The notebook, the texts, the screenshots, the recording. They didn't just save my assets. They saved my reputation, my future, maybe even my freedom. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the divorce. It was accepting that the person I loved had chosen to use my love as leverage, that he'd seen my loyalty not as devotion, but as weakness. Jared thought he knew the kind of woman I was. Quiet, steady, accommodating. He mistook quiet for fragile, steady, for submissive accommodation, for surrender. He didn't understand that some women don't explode. Some women endure, document, prepare, and when the moment comes, they walk away with receipts. The closing question people ask is, would you do anything differently? Maybe I would have left earlier. Maybe I would have stopped giving him chances long after he'd stopped earning them. Maybe I would have trusted the knot in my chest the first time he tried to make me feel small. But I don't regret the path I took. It led me here, to a quiet apartment filled with soft light, to evenings spent reading instead of arguing, to mornings where I wake up without dread, to a life that finally feels like my own again. Sometimes healing looks like loud breakthroughs. Sometimes healing looks like a spreadsheet balancing for the first time in years. And sometimes healing looks like sitting alone on your couch, watching sunlight crawl across your floor, realizing you finally came home. Maybe this story touched something inside you, a moment you lived, a feeling you once carried. It's hard to admit when the person you vowed to love becomes the person you need protection from. We often stay quiet to keep the peace until we realize the cost of that peace is ourselves. If you've ever found strength in the quiet moments or had to fight for your own narrative against someone else's lies, share your thoughts or your own experience in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from so I can create more stories just for you.